Yeah, this question is really hard. And so the first thing I should just remind you of is remember, we're skipping this question, whether we read the passage or not. We need to save this for last because we need to read everything else to get a better sense of what it's about and to do the other questions so that we can kind of see what the main ideas are. And that means that this would probably be the last question that you answer on this test. And so it's a hard one, and these answer choices all look the same. And so the best we can really do here is process of elimination, which means just we really need to see what all the individual words and phrases in these choices mean and really test them against the passage. Now, normally I would not reread the passage. However, in this case, like I'm just skipping ahead a little bit. When I read these answer choices the first time, I didn't really notice many differences enough that I would be able to kind of like instantly tell ones that are right and wrong. So I am going to quickly, not really reread it, I'm just going to kind of hit some of the highlights here. So because they're asking, what is the main focus shift from, right? So I'm trying to see like what's going on in all these different parts. And the blurb can absolutely help us, right? How the Higgs boson was found. That's kind of helpful. Tells us maybe what the main idea is. So nearly half a century ago, they talk about Peter Higgs and what he did. So now they're talking about how we can think of mass and heft. There's a freight train. This is an example. Okay, where do the masses of these and other particles come from? When physicists in the 1960s modeled the behavior of these particles, there's a puzzle. If they imagine the particles are all massless, blah, 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 stuff about this. Okay, blah, blah, blah. They're complex, inconsistent. Okay, what to do? Here's an idea put forward by Higgs. Something about the fields, Higgs fields, and there's stuff about the field again, more field stuff, resistance. They talked about the ping pong ball. We had a question about the ping pong ball. Okay, so this is all about what his field is. Okay, in '64 he submitted a paper and the paper was rejected. Okay, great. It's no relevance to physics. But he persevered, and they took the proposal, and it was a stroke of genius, and it was good. Okay. The initial rejection, so 64 again, mid-'80s, the assessment had changed. They fully bought into the idea. We did questions about this paragraph, so we have a good sense of what this paragraph is about. And it was certain, and it had yet to be established experimentally, and on occasion that happens. Okay. Woo! That was a very quick version. Notice, I didn't really dive deep into any specific science stuff. In fact, most of the stuff that I kind of just skipped over was the description of the science, because that stuff just makes my head hurt, and that's not really going to be a main idea, right? What I care about is like the big picture stuff that they're describing, and then the little, I don't need to understand the science, is basically what it comes down to. The little details shouldn't matter for a question like this that's asking about the main idea. So let's see if anything here now matches with this general trend of what I saw. So it's a technical account of the Higgs field to a description of it aimed at a broad audience. Well, a technical account is going to be a very detailed account. Now, maybe here we get a little bit of a description of what's going on. But remember, what are we getting? We're talking about a freight train. We're getting an example about that. Here's the Higgs field. Here's where they first introduced the Higgs field. Right, so this other part we're kind of just skipping over entirely. And when we did talk about the Higgs field, what did we do? We had another question about the ping pong ball. So is that really a technical account of what the Higgs field is? No, it has nothing to do with ping pong balls. We use that as an analogy. And so this doesn't really work. Maybe, yes, there is a description of it aimed at a broad audience. That's the ping pong ball thing. But a technical account is really going to get even way beyond the science-y language that they use here. So we do not have that, okay? Let's keep going. I don't know that this is an obviously wrong choice, but I think we're going to see a better choice. So let's keep going. A review of Higgs' work to a contextualization of that work within Higgs' era. Well, again, kind of maybe. Did they review Higgs' work? Well, they kind of introduced it to us. And specifically, it's not all of Higgs' work that we were learning about. It's just specifically this Higgs field. So I don't really know what else he did. To contextualization of that work within Higgs' era, that's probably true. But remember, we then got beyond that, right? We went into the mid-1980s, and we started talking about what happened after the 60s, right? So there was a reason I was doing a lot of stuff about time here. That seems to be a big piece of this. So I'd love it if they mentioned future eras or the times that came after Higgs. Let's look at C. An explanation of the Higgs field to a discussion of the response to Higgs's theory. Yeah, so that seems better to me. Okay, the Higgs field as opposed to Higgs' work, right? So we're not looking at all the things that Higgs did, where this passage is looking specifically about the field and what his proposal was. Also, review of Higgs' work. That almost seems like a critical kind of word, right? Like they're deciding whether his work was good or not. That's not really what they're doing. They're just explaining what he thought about the field, and then they have this other piece, which is the response to the theory. At first it was rejected, then it was accepted. And so notice, like, that has much better answers than the other choices that we've seen, right? Like here I'm not guessing that those things are talked about, right? I'm pointing to specific spots, and it does seem that, yes, like at least 2 of the paragraphs are about how people responded, and at least this part here is kind of talking about the field. This kind of is as well by introducing it. So that seems to fit. Let's look at D, an analysis of the Higgs field to a suggestion of future discoveries. That's maybe the most obviously wrong. They're not talking about the future anywhere in this passage, right? We kind of end in the 80s. So that's definitely wrong. And look, I'd be guessing C here. This is a case where I'd maybe be like 75% confident in that choice, which happens. And, you know, what does that mean? Well, that means most of the time when this happens to me on an SAT, I end up getting it right, and my reasons were right. But there's a reason I, get 1 or 2 reading questions wrong, when I do an SAT. Sometimes I don't, sometimes I do. It's kind of just about luck. But that's okay. We're always kind of playing the odds. And a lot of the strategies that we use are meant to increase our odds, but there's always a small chance that we miss something important or that we are just misinterpreting something that they're saying. We want to do process of elimination so that we're looking at each of those phrases and giving our brain more and more opportunities to notice the important stuff. And so that's why when I'm crossing out choices, notice I'm not crossing out the choice just at the end here, just on the letter. I'm underlining all these little pieces as I go through. Showing your work is super important for process of elimination. We're eliminating phrases. We're eliminating words. Other words and phrases in the choice might be good, but we're looking for the ones that aren't. And that's a really important thing to be doing on the page so that you can train your brain to do that as well, and to think that way. This is hard. If you got it wrong, I wouldn't worry about it. Most of the questions on the test are not this bad. It does suck that it's near the end, but there are better questions to spend your time on. All of the figure questions, the vocab, that's where you're going to guarantee points much better than something like this. So if you're running out of time, skip this. It should be the last question you do, not the first, even though it's the first of this passage. Save whole passage questions for last.